Continuing where I left off, Chapter 19. On the Pratzen Heights, where he had fallen with the flagstaff in his hands, lay Prince Andrei Bolkonsky, bleeding profusely and unconsciously, uttering soft, pitiful, childish moans. Toward evening he stopped moaning and became quite still. He did not know how long he remained unconscious. Suddenly he again felt that he was alive, and suffering from a burning, lacerating pain in the head. "Where is it? That lofty sky I never knew till now and only saw today," was his first thought. "This suffering, too, I did not know before," he thought. "No, I knew nothing till now. But where am I?" He listened, and caught the sound of approaching horses, and of voices speaking French. He opened his eyes. Above him once more there was the lofty sky, with rising clouds, through which he glimpsed the blue infinity. He did not turn his head, and did not see those who, judging by the sounds of hoof-beats and voices, had ridden up to him and stopped. It was Napoleon, accompanied by 2 aides de camp, making a tour of the battlefield. Bonaparte had given final orders to strengthen the batteries firing on the August Dam, and was looking over the dead and wounded left on the field. "Fine men," observed Napoleon, looking at the dead Russian grenadier, who laid on his stomach, with his face plunged into the earth, the back of his neck blackened, and one already stiffened arm flung wide. "The battery guns have exhausted their ammunition, sire," reported an adjutant who had just come from the batteries firing on August. "Have some brought up from the reserve," said Napoleon, and having gone a few steps, he stopped and looked down at Prince Andrei, who laid on his back with the flagstaff that had been dropped beside him. The flag had already been taken by the French as a trophy. "There's a fine death," said Napoleon, gazing at Bolkonsky. Prince Andrei realized that this was said of him, and that it was Napoleon who said it. He heard the speaker of these words addressed as sire, but he heard the words as he might have heard the buzzing of a fly. Not only did they not interest him, but he took no notice of him, instantly forgot him. His head was burning. He felt that he was losing blood, and saw above him the remote, lofty, internal heavens. He knew that it was Napoleon, his hero. But at the moment Napoleon seemed to him such a small, insignificant creature compared with what was taking place between his soul and lofty, infinite sky with the clouds sailing over it. At that moment it meant absolutely nothing to him who might be standing over him or what might be said of him. He was only glad there were people there, only wished they would help him and bring him back to life, which seemed to him so beautiful. Now that he understood it differently, he made a supreme effort to stir and utter a sound. He feebly moved his leg and produced a faint, sickly moan that roused his own pity. "Ah, he is alive," said Napoleon. "Pick up this young man and carry him to the dressing station." Having said this, Napoleon rode on to meet Marshal Lannes, who, hat in hand and smiling, rode up to the Emperor to congratulate him on his victory. Prince Andrei remembered nothing more. He lost consciousness from the terrible pain of being lifted onto the stretcher, the jolting while being moved, and the probing of his wound at the dressing station. He regained consciousness only toward the end of the day, when, with other wounded and captured Russian officers, he was moved to a hospital. During this transfer he felt a little stronger and was able to look about him and even to speak. The first words he heard on regaining consciousness were those of a French convoy officer, hurriedly saying, "We must halt here. The Emperor will be coming this way, and it will please him to see these gentlemen prisoners. There are so many prisoners today, almost the whole Russian army, that he's probably sick of looking at them," said another officer. "Well, anyhow, this one, they say, is the commander of all the Emperor Alexander's guards," said the first officer, pointing to a wounded Russian officer in the white uniform of the Horse Guards. Bolkonsky recognized Prince Repnin, whom he had met in Petersburg society. Beside him stood a youth of 19, also a wounded officer of the Horse Guards. Bonaparte rode up at a gallop and reined in his horse. "Who is the senior officer here?" he asked on seeing the prisoners. They named the colonel, Prince Repnin. "You are the commander of Emperor Alexander's regiment of Horse Guards?" asked Napoleon. "I commanded a squadron," replied Repnin. "Your regiment performed its duty honorably," said Napoleon. "The praise of a great commander is a soldier's highest reward," replied Repnin. "I bestowed it with pleasure," said Napoleon. "Who is that young man beside you?" Prince Repnin named Lieutenant Sokolin. Looking at him, Napoleon smiled and said, "He is rather young to come and meddle with us." "Youth is no impediment to courage," murmured the young man, his voice breaking. "A fine answer," said Napoleon. "Young man, you will go far." Prince Andrei, who had also been brought forward to complete the show of prisoners for the emperor, could not fail to attract his notice. Napoleon apparently remembered seeing him on the field, and addressed him with the same epithet, "young man," with which his first sight of Bolkonsky was associated in his memory. "And you, young man," he said. "Well, how are you feeling, mon brave?" Although 5 minutes before Prince Andrei had been able to say a few words to the soldiers who were carrying him, now, with his eyes fixed on Napoleon, he was silent. So trivial, at that moment, seemed to him all the interest that engrossed Napoleon. So petty did his hero himself, with his paltry vanity and joy in victory, appear, compared with that lofty, inequitable, benevolent sky which he had seen and understood, that he could not answer him. Indeed, everything seemed to him so futile and insignificant in comparison with that solemn and sublime train of thought which weakness, loss of blood, suffering, and the nearness of death had induced in him. Looking into Napoleon's eyes, Prince Andrei thought of the insignificance of greatness, the unimportance of life, which no one could understand, and of the still greater unimportance of death, the meaning of which no living person could understand and explain. The emperor, without waiting for a reply, turned away and said to one of his officers, "Have these gentlemen attended to, and taken to my bivouac. Let my doctor, Larrey, examine their wounds. Au revoir, Prince Repnin." He galloped away, his face beaming with happiness and self-satisfaction. The soldiers who had been carrying Prince Andrei had taken the little gold image that Princess Marya had hung around her brother's neck. But when they saw the emperor's solicitude for these prisoners, they hastened to return to it. Prince Andrei did not see how or whom it was replaced, but the image on its delicate gold chain suddenly appeared on his chest outside his uniform. It would be good, thought Prince Andrei, glancing at the little image that his sister had hung around his neck with such reverence and emotion. It would be good if everything was as clear and simple as it seems to Princess Marya. How good it would be to know where to seek help in this life, and what to expect after it, beyond the grave. How happy and at peace I should be if I could now say, "Lord, have mercy on me." But to whom should I say this? To some power, indefinable and incomprehensible, to which I not only cannot appeal, but which I cannot express in words. The great all or nothing, he said to himself. Or to that God who has been sewn into this amulet of Marya. There is nothing certain, nothing except the nothingness of everything that is comprehensible to me, and the greatness of something incomprehensible, but all important. The stretchers moved on. At every jolt he again felt intolerable pain. His fever increased, and he became delirious. Visions of his father, wife, sister, and future son, and the tenderness he had felt for them the night before the battle, the future of the insignificant little Napoleon, and above all this, those lofty heavens, formed the principal element of his delirious visions. The quiet home life and tranquil happiness of Bald Hills rose before him. He was enjoying this happiness, when suddenly there appeared that little Napoleon with his narrow, heartless look of happiness at the misery of others, and again the doubts and torments, and only the heavens promised peace. Toward morning, all his dreams mingled and melted away in the chaos and darkness of unconsciousness and oblivion, which, in the opinion of Napoleon's doctor, Larry was far more likely to end in death than in recovery. "A nervous bilious type," said Larry. "He won't recover." Prince Andrei, with the other hopeless cases, was left to the care of the local inhabitants. Book 2 of War and Peace. Part 1, Chapter 1. Early in the year 1806, Nikolai Rostov returned home on the leave. Denisov, too, was going home to Voronezh, and Rostov persuaded him to travel with him as far as Moscow and stay with him there. Meeting a comrade at the next to the last posting station, Denisov had drunk 3 bottles of wine with him, and the rest of the way, despite the ruts in the road, slept soundly at the bottom of the sledge beside Rostov, who grew more and more impatient the nearer they got to Moscow. How much longer? How much longer? Oh, these insufferable streets, these shops, baker signs, street lamps, and sledges, thought Rostov, with their leave orders had been entered at the town gate, and they were driving into Moscow. "Denisov, we're here!" "Asleep," he said, his whole body straining forward, as if by that position he hoped to accelerate the speed of the sledge. Denisov made no response. "Here's the corner of the crossroads where Zakhar, the cabman, has his stand. And there's Zakhar himself, and still the same horse. And there's the little shop where we used to buy gingerbread. Can't you hurry? Now then!" "Which house is it?" asked the driver. "That one, at the end, the big one. Don't you see?" "That's our house," said Rostov. "That's it. That's our house, Denisov. Denisov, we're almost there." Denisov raised his head and cleared his throat, but said nothing. "Dmitri," said Rostov to his valet on the coachman's seat, "those lights are in our house, aren't they?" "Yes, sir, and there's light in your father's study." "Then they've not gone to bed yet? What do you think? Mine, now? Don't forget to put out my new tunic at once," added Rostov, fingering his new mustache. "We'll get on," he shouted to the driver. "Do wake up, Vaska," he added, turning to Denisov, who was nodding again. "Come, do hurry. You shall have 3 silver roubles for vodka. But get on," shouted Rostov, when the sledge was only 3 houses from his door. It seemed to him that the horses were not moving. At last the sledge bore to the right and drew up at the carriage porch, and Rostov saw overhead the familiar cornice with a fragment of a plaster broken off, the steps, the curbstone. He sprang out of the sledge before it stopped and ran into the hall. The house was as lifeless, as inhospitable, as if unmindful of who had arrived. There was no one in the hall. "Oh God, is everything all right?" thought Rostov, stopping for a moment with a sinking heart, then running farther along the hall and up the crooked steps of the familiar staircase. Still the same old door-handle, which always annoyed the Countess when it was not properly cleaned, still turning as loosely as ever. A single tallow candle burned in the anteroom. Old Mikhail was asleep on the chest. Provalky, the footman, who was so strong that he could lift up a carriage from the back, sat plaiting bast shoes out of strips of selvage. He looked up as the door opened, and his drowsy, apathetic expression was instantly transformed to one of delighted amazement. "Father in heaven, the young count!" he cried, recognizing his young master. "Can it be the little lamb?" And trembling with excitement, Provalsky rushed to the drawing-room door, probably with the intention of announcing him, then changed his mind and came back and kissed the young master on the shoulder. "Ah, well," inquired Rostov, drawing away his arm. "God be praised. All is well. God be praised. They've just finished supper. Let me have a look at you, your Excellency. Is everything quite all right? God be praised. God be praised." Rostov had completely forgotten Denisov, and not wanting anyone to announce his arrival, threw off his fur coat and ran on tiptoe into the big, dark ballroom. Everything was the same card tables, the same chandelier with a cover on it. But someone had already seen the young master, and before he had reached the drawing-room, someone flew out of a side door like a tornado and began hugging and kissing him. Then a second and a third creature of the same order popped out of other doors, and there were more hugging and kissing, more outcries and tears of joy. He could not distinguish which was Papa, which was Natasha, and which was Petya. Everyone was shouting, talking, and kissing at the same time. Only his mother was not there, and he noticed that. And I didn't even know, Nikolosha, my darling. He's here, our boy. Darling Kola, how's he changed? Where are the candles? Tea? Kiss me too. And me, darling. Sonya, Natasha, Petya, Anna Mikhailova, Vera, and the old count were all hugging him. The maids and manservants flocked into the room, exclaiming and ohining and ahing. Petya clung to his legs. Me too, he kept shouting. After pulling him down to her and covering his face with kisses, Natasha skipped back and jumped up and down in one spot like a goat, still holding him by the skirt of his jacket and shrieking with delight. On all sides were loving eyes glistening with tears of joy, on all sides lips seeking kisses. Sonya, red as calico, clung to his arm and looked into the eyes she had been longing to see, radiant with bliss. She was now 16 and very pretty, especially at this moment of joyous, rapturous excitement. She gazed at him, unable to take her eyes off him, smiling and holding her breath. He gave her a grateful look, but he was still expectantly looking for someone. The old countess had not yet appeared. By now footsteps were heard at the door, steps so rapid that they could hardly be his mother's. Yet it was she, in a new gown that he did not know, made during his absence. The others all let him go, and he ran to her. When they came together, she fell on his breast, sobbing. She could not lift her face, but only pressed it to the cold braiding of his hussar jacket. Denisov, who had come into the room unnoticed by anyone, stood wiping his eyes as he watched them. Vasily Denisov, your son's friend, he said, introducing himself to the Count, who was looking at him inquiringly. Welcome. I know who you are, said the Count, kissing and embracing Denisov. Nikolosha wrote us. Natasha, Vera, look, here is Denisov. The same creature, ecstatic faces turned to the shaggy figure of Denisov and surrounded him. Darling, Denisov, squealed Natasha, beside herself with joy, and darting up to him, threw her arms around him and kissed him. Everyone was disconcerted by this sudden freak of Natasha's. Denisov too blushed, but smiled, and taking Natasha's hand, kissed it. Denisov was shown to the room that had been prepared for him, and the Rostovs all gathered around Nikoloshka in the sitting room. The old countess, now letting go of his hand, which she kept kissing every minute, sat beside him. The others clustered around him, their rapturous, adoring eyes not missing a single look, word, or gesture. His brother and sisters tussled for a place beside him, and disputed over who should bring him tea, a handkerchief, and his pipe. Rostov was very happy in the love they showed him, but the first moments of meeting had been so blissful that his present joy seemed insufficient, and he kept expecting something more, and yet more. Next morning, after the journey, the travelers slept till 10 o'clock. The adjoining room was littered with sabers, pouches, saberatches, open trunks, and dirty boots. 2 freshly cleaned pairs with spurs had just been placed by the wall. Servants were bringing basins, hot water for shaving, and well-brushed clothes. There was a masculine odor and the smell of tobacco. Hey, Gwishka, my pipe, came Vaska Deniskov's husky voice. Rostov, get up. Rostov, rubbing his eyes, which seemed glued together, raised his disheveled head from the hot pillow. Why, is it late? Late. It's nearly 10, answered Natasha's voice from the next room, where they heard the rustle of starched petticoats and girls whispering and laughing. The door was open a crack and revealed a glimpse of something blue, of ribbons, black hair, and merry faces. It was Natasha, Sonya, and Petya, who had come to see whether they were getting up. Nikoleka, get up! Natasha's voice was heard at the door again. At once! Meanwhile, Petya had discovered and seized upon the sabers in the outer room, and with the delight of boys feel at the slight of military elder brother, and forgetting that it was not proper for the girls to see men's undressed, opened the bedroom door. Is this your saber? He cried. The girl sprang back. Denisov hid his hairy legs under the blanket, and with a look of dismay, appealed to his friend for help. The door that admitted Petya was closed behind him. Laughter was heard behind it. Nikolenka came out in a dressing-room gown. Natasha called to his brother. "Is this your saber-axe, Petya, or is it yours?" he said, addressing the black-mustached Denisov with slavish respect. Rostov hastily put something on his feet, drew on his dressing gown, and went out. Natasha had put on one spur boot and was just slipping her foot into the other when he came in. Sonia was spinning about to make her skirt balloon up before sitting down. They were dressed alike in new blue dresses, fresh, rosy, and gay. Sonia ran away, but Natasha, taking her brother's arms, led him to the sitting room, where they began talking. They scarcely gave each other time to ask and answer all the questions concerning the thousands of trifling matters that were of interest to them alone. Natasha laughed at everything either of them said, not because what they were saying was amusing, but because she was in such high spirits she could not contain her joy, which brimmed over in laughter. "Oh, how nice, how splendid," she said to everything. Rostov felt that, under the influence of these warm rays of love, for the first time in a year and a half the pure childish smile he had not once smiled since leaving home was burgeoning in his soul and on his face. "No, but listen, you're a grown-up man now, aren't you? I'm awfully glad you're my brother," said Natasha, touching her brother's mustache. "I love to know what you men are really like. Are you just like us?" "No." "Why did Sonia run away?" asked Rostov. "Oh, that's a whole long story. How are you going to address her? Shall you call her thou or you?" "However I happen to," said Rostov. "Say you to her, please. I'll tell you why later." "But why?" "All right, I'll tell you now. You know that Sonia is my dearest friend, such a friend that I burn my arm for her sake. I'll show you." She pushed up the muslin sleeve on her long, slender, delicate arm, and showed him a red mark high above the elbow, near the shoulder, in a place where it would be covered even in a ball gown. "I did that to prove my love. I just heated a ruler in the fire and pressed it there." Sitting on the sofa with little cushions on the arm in the room that used to be his schoolroom, and looking into Natasha's wide, excited eyes, Rostov again entered into the world of childhood and family, which had no meaning for anyone else, but gave him some of the greatest joys of his life. And burning one's arm with a ruler as proof of love did not seem pointless to him. He understood it and was not surprised. "And then, is that all?" he asked. "Well, we are such friends, that was just nonsense with the ruler, but we are friends forever. When she loves anyone, it's for life." "I don't understand that. I forget so quickly." "Well, what about it?" "Well, that's how she loves me. And you?" Suddenly, Natasha blushed. "Well, you remember before you went away, well, she says you are to forget all that. She says I shall love him always, but let him be free." "That's really splendid. Splendid and noble, isn't it?" "Very noble, isn't it?" asked Natasha, so seriously and with such emotion that it was evident that what she was now saying she had talked of before with tears. Rostov grew thoughtful. "I never go back on my word," he said. "And besides, Sonia is so charming that only a fool would renounce such happiness." "Of course," cried Natasha. "She and I have talked it over. We knew you would say that. But it won't do, because, don't you see, if you say that, if you consider yourself bound by your word, it would look as if she had said that on purpose. It would be just as though you were obliged to marry her, and that makes it absolutely wrong." Rostov saw that they had thought it all out very carefully. Though he had been struck by Sonia's beauty the night before, today, when he caught a glimpse of her, she seemed even lovelier. She was a charming girl of 16, and obviously was passionately in love with him, and he did not doubt this for an instant. Why should he not love her now, and even marry her, he thought. But not just at present. There were so many pleasures and interests at the moment. "Yes," he concluded, "they have thought it all out very well. I must remain free." "Well then, that's fine," he said. "We'll talk about it later. Oh, how glad I am to be back with you," he added. "And what about you? Still true to Boris?" "Oh, what nonsense!" Natasha burst out laughing. "I don't even give him a thought, nor anyone else. I'm not interested in such matters." "Really? What are you interested in now?" "Me?" repeated Natasha, and a happy smile lit up her face. "Have you seen Duport, the famous dancer? Then you won't understand." Curving her arms, Natasha held out her skirt as dancers do, ran back a few steps, turned, and whipping her little feet together, executed in Trentet, then took a few steps on the very tips of her toes. See how I'm standing? Look! But she could not stay up on her toes. That's what I'm interested in now. I'm never going to marry anyone. I'm going to be a dancer. Only don't tell anyone. Rostov laughed so loudly and so merrily that Denisov, hearing him from the bedroom, felt envious, and Natasha herself could not help joining him. No, but don't you think it's lovely? She kept saying. It's all right. So you no longer want to marry Boris? Natasha flared up. I don't want to marry anyone, and I'll tell him so myself when I see him, said Rostov. But that's all nonsense, Natasha chattered on. Tell me, is Denisov nice? Very. Well, goodbye then. Go and dress. Is he very dreadful, Denisov? Why dreadful? Asked Nikolai. No, Vaska's a splendid fellow. You call him Vaska? That's funny. And is he really very nice? Very nice. Well, be quick. We all have breakfast together. And Natasha rose and glided out the room on tiptoe like a ballet dancer, but smiling as only a happy girl of 15 can smile. When Rostov met Sonia in the drawing room, he blushed and did not know how to behave for her. The evening before, in the first joyous moment of meeting, they had kissed. But they felt this was out of the question today. He felt that everyone, including his mothers and sisters, were watching him, curious to see how he would treat her. He kissed her hand and called her you and Sonia. But when their eyes met, they said do and spoke of tender kisses. Her eyes asked his forgiveness for having dared, though Natasha, to remind him of his promise, and thanked him for his love. His eyes thanked her for offering him his freedom, and told her that either way he would never cease loving her, for it was impossible not to love her. How strange it is, said Vera, choosing a moment of general silence, that Sonia and Nikolenka now say to each other and treat each other like strangers. Vera's observations were correct, as her observations generally were, but like most of her remarks, it made everyone feel uncomfortable, not only Sonia, Nikolai, and Natasha, but even the old countess, who feared that this love of her son for Sonia might prevent him from making a brilliant match, and she blushed like a girl. To Rostov's surprise, Denisov appeared in a uniform, promenade and scented, and was quite as dashing in the drawing room as one on the battlefield, and much more amiable to the ladies and gentlemen than Rostov had ever expected to be. And with that, I'm going to leave it at that. If you're watching this next, it's been a while since I've done reading the series of Tolstoy's War and Peace. But continue watching it. Give it a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down. Leave a comment, or or subscribe, or do nothing and keep watching. And I will see you in the next video. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.